if sitting really is the new smoking, then we have to change our approach to a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? If it's really that bad, right? That's not acceptable. We can't just hear that message and go, oh, well, I guess that's not good, right? And then do nothing. So if it's really that bad, like if you smoked, you guys smoke? You don't smoke, right? If you smoked, right? A lot of people used to smoke and quit, which is awesome. But if you smoked, you took a drag off a cigarette, and then you started coughing up blood right away, that might change your approach, right, a little bit. And the thing is, as sitting, you can sit a lot and not notice the damage, right? That's sort of the problem, one of the problems. But you know, years ago, the AMA said the AMA used to actually promote the health benefits of smoking in their journal. So I think we've come a long way, right, in figuring out what is and isn't acceptable. But I don't think most people realize how damaging this really is. So that's kind of the reason why I liked this topic, and because it's so prevalent. And it's really intimately related to chiropractic because we take care of the spine, right? So Einstein said you cannot solve a problem. You might want to write this one down because I think this is so cool. Einstein said, a smart guy, Einstein, right? You cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking you had when the problem was created. So if that's true, then we have to revamp the way we look at what health really is, right? And that might be the impetus for changing the way we approach sitting. Because if we have to say, well, okay, well, why is this important? Why do I have to change it? How do I know if it's a problem? If it's not healthy, what is health? So we start there. To be healthy, right? It's more than just the absence of a symptom, isn't it? Like if you're asymptomatic, can you just assume that you're healthy? Probably not, right? Because the first sign of a lot of disease, the first symptom rather, comes very late in the game, right? So like heart disease is a good example. First symptom for half the people with heart disease is a heart attack. So not a lot of warning. And that's the same with cancer, diabetes, spinal decay. So a lot of this stuff comes late. So you're sitting there for years. In fact, we sit as 5-, 6-year-olds, right, in the classroom most of the day, right? So by default, we have a sedentary lifestyle from the get-go. So I think we have to change the approach and think, okay, well then what is health if it's more than just the absence of symptoms? And the World Health Organization says that health is more than the absence of disease or infirmity, but it's total physical, mental, and social well-being. I like that. So it puts a lot of responsibility back on us to be proactive, right? Because if we're just reactive, treating symptoms, and I'm okay, if I feel okay, then all of a sudden we slide into dis-ease. I had teachers in school that talked about that and said the difference is really weighing out the balance between cumulative constructive survival values versus cumulative destructive survival values. And I remember hearing that for the first time and thinking, what are they talking about? But it's obvious to me now, right? It's just a balance, really. And so a lot of the cumulatively, right, sitting is really the problem. Sitting now a little bit, it's not the end of the world, right? But if you sit cumulatively over years of your life, the decay sets in. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Nice to see you. So, just getting into a little bit about why sitting's so bad. Sitting's the new smoking, kind of harsh language, right? Uh-oh, the wrong button. So, what happens to your body when you sit for long periods of time? And you guys have enough space, I think, to make some notes if you'd like. Let's talk about that. So, blood fats stay in the blood longer because muscles are idle and not burning fat. Interesting, right? So that static posture, and by the way, since we're talking about sitting and how sitting's bad, I would go a step further and say the nature of sitting is the problem. On a lot of levels, physiologically, in terms of organic function that we're going to talk about. Standing and being very sedentary is also very bad for you. Doesn't even count as exercise. I would say that it's a little better than sitting, but in any case, movement is the key. Because years ago, our ancestors, and I'm really into this paleo mentality now, Because I think, you know, like I was looking at pictures of my grandparents, and, you know, back in the 70s, when they were in their 50s, they looked old, right? They looked and acted and dressed old. And they were, effectively. They weren't moving a lot, you know, but they moved more than we move today. And obesity was not a big deal back then, right? People moved a lot more. So I study that, and I study, you know, like a third now of the country basically is clinically overweight or obese, right? And the kids are in the same boat, and diabetes is going out of control, right? And there's more type 2 diabetes, and they used to call it adult onset, but now it's not that, it's type 2 because kids are getting it, right? And now there's a type 3 diabetes, right? Type 3 diabetes is, they're linking the sugar problem to brain disease. And we'll even talk about what this sitting does to the brain. But, you know, years ago, back in the paleo days, if you didn't move, you didn't eat, right? In fact, that was kind of the case probably up through the early part of the 20th century. If you didn't move, you didn't eat. People who know about growing up on a farm, right, stuff like that, you know what that's like. And now, like supermarkets, agribusiness, right, Monsanto, that stuff. Right now it's proliferated, it's accessible, and we all eat, but it's not good. And we certainly don't move. Like you drive up to the drive-thru, you're sitting in your car. You stick your arm on it, you grab, you know, 6,000 calories, right? You don't burn it. That's a problem. Right? And then we sit all day. So we're sitting at work, we're sitting in our cars, and we'll talk about all that. But I think, you know, so if we didn't move, we didn't eat. But even worse, something would eat you. Like something would get you, right? You had to move, and we all moved. But people aren't doing that these days. So one day of prolonged sitting decreases your insulin response. I know a lot of people, patients that are diabetic, and they can't figure out why. They can't get their blood sugar right. And there's a lot of influences to that. But not coincidentally, a lot of folks who are diabetic also sit a lot. They're not active people. And so tweaking your activity level, and so the flip side to this whole thing about why, you know, if sitting's bad, well, movement's good, right? So we talk a lot about the converse. So a lot of it is that they're just not moving enough. And so insulin sensitivity levels are affected. And they've done studies to show that. And I'll share a couple studies with you guys in a little bit. Shoulder, here's the more obvious perhaps. Shoulder muscles, trapezius muscles are overstretched. So do you guys know what the trapezius muscles are? You know, you look at a bodybuilder and they have these like big up here, right? These, and then in the back, it's actually a back muscle. But people think of the trap as a shoulder muscle, but it's not. So the traps connect to the neck and to the base of the skull, and then they run down and they insert along the borders of the scapula, those chicken wing bones, and they go all the way down to the bottom of the rib cage. Huge muscle group. And it's a primary postural muscle. So I see a lot of people, you know, where their shoulders are rolling in, and you know, you probably even feel it, right? You sit a lot, especially if you're in front of the computer a lot, and your rib cage starts to deform, it starts to cave in, and your shoulders roll in, right? And you feel it. People say to me all day, I try to sit up straight, but I can't stay there. And the reason for that is because all the sitting causes the ligaments in front of the spinal column to shorten and tighten. And as those ligaments deform and they get shorter and tighter, they lose their normal elastic, plastic, viscous, and strength properties. Then the muscles will never be strong enough, those trapezius muscles, to overcome that. So they're stretched and contracted, and they're trying to pull that head back up over the shoulders. Because the middle of your ear represents the middle of your head, and it should be right over that AC joint in your shoulder when you stand. And most people don't stand like this, right? They're like this, right? And that's because that's how they look when they sit, all day in front of the computer. So we talk about ergonomic setup, right, a lot. Standing, sitting is probably the way we're going to go. I'll bet you anything. And we should all get into this business. Get into the business of going into companies and teaching this stuff. Because this is where it's going. 20 years from now, nobody's going to be sitting at work. Everybody's going to have standing workstations. It might not even take that long. Based on what I heard today, the lady's on her treadmill, So I think that that's an easy fix. And most of the reason why people say they feel that is because of the sitting and just changing the ergonomic setup. So get the monitors raised up. Put the monitor so that the bottom of the monitor is at eye level. So if you're not going to change to standing most of the time, and you're going to still sit, one nice thing you can do is raise that monitor up so your gaze is slightly upward, and that's going to unload those trapezius muscles and stop that flexion posture. And flexion's pathological. Flexion posture is pathological to the central nervous system and to the function of your body, right?
What does that mean?
Who said that? Pathological, good question. Disease-oriented. So disease is dis-ease, right? So lack of ease, lack of normal. So pushing us toward decay, disease, abnormal function. So I don't think most people even think about that, right? That there's a relationship, a very intimate relationship between your posture and your function and your health. Posture's not just looking good, it's not even just feeling good, it's functional. It's hugely important. Well, there was a famous MD, Sheely, I think his last name was, and he said posture affects and moderates every single function in the body, from breathing to hormonal production. And I get that as a chiropractor, and I get what's happening to the spine, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But so your chest muscles, right, if your traps are stretched and you're forward and you're flexed, your chest muscles are understretched, and that's what causes the shoulders, right, to roll in. And so that's why people are looking for massage all day long, elements massage and massage envy. Massage places are all over the place, right? Big business. Because you could go for a massage pretty much every single day and feel like you need a massage. And that's because, and I like it, don't get me wrong, I think it's great. And I used to have a massage therapist, sometimes I'll refer out to massage therapists because I think it's a wonderful profession, but it is used in this culture as a treatment for symptoms. It's like massage aspirin, right? It's better than taking drugs, right? But it's kind of like making you feel good. It's the jacuzzi experience. It feels good. And then it goes away. Increased pressure on discs in the spinal column. This is a biggie. You guys know about slipped discs, herniated discs, bulging discs. A disc cannot slip. So this is interesting. I'm a big language person. The disc can't slip because it's housed by ligaments, really strong ligaments that wrap around the spinal column. But a disc abnormally loaded will dehydrate. And as it's getting weaker, it can bulge. As those outer annular fibers of the disc get weak and they tear, the inner content of the disc can leak out, like the jelly in the donut. That's the herniated disc. The bulging disc is simply when the disc is abnormally loaded and those outer annular fibers, they're called, tear a little bit, and the disc wall gets weak and it bulges, it changes its shape, and it bulges out and it can hit those nerves. And these nerves come out of the spinal cord and they go out to all the structures, all the organs. So as you're sitting all the time, most people lose that normal curve in the lower back. That's called a lordosis. So this is the belly. This is the backside, okay? You see that curve, right? That's critical to maintaining the normal load on the disc and on the joint back here. But over time, from too much sitting, what happens is the pelvis rolls forward and you lose that curve. Women, though, a lot of times, due to estrogen and ligamentous sort of hyper-elasticity and high heels, end up a lot of times like that, with an excessive lordosis, even though they sometimes sit a lot. Either way, the load is abnormal. It puts a lot of pressure on the disc, and the disc can bulge or herniate. You see that red thing sticking out? And if that hits the nerve, you'll know it. That's that sciatica, that burning, tingling, numbness, stuff like that. I had a case one time where a guy came in. I see this a lot in men. And he had lost that normal curve from too much bending. Flexion again, right? Flexion posture. He sat a fair amount. When he wasn't sitting, he was doing a lot of landscaping. That was his thing. And he lost the curve, and he had degenerative disc disease. And it got so bad that when the nerve was contacted, it was there, it was chronic. He's like most guys, like, almost sent out, need help. Right? And he came to me like, it was unbelievable. But his leg, he didn't just feel pain, but he had muscle atrophy. You know what that means? The muscle was wasting, it was dying, because the nerve supply wasn't going there, right? Well, what do you think happens to the organs when the nerve supply is not going, right? You don't feel it, but you're losing function, right? So this guy had muscle atrophy, weakness, and one calf was like that big around, and one was like that big around. So we put him through a protocol, but he got better, to the point where he didn't need surgery. Pretty cool. So the body's ability to heal is amazing. That's the good news. So pressure on the disc, pressure on the spine, too much sitting is bad. Reduced metabolic rate, that makes it easy to gain weight. Makes sense, right? If you're not moving, you're not burning, right? It's math. Calories in, calories out, right? Burning and taking calories in. So we have to move, and the good news is that you don't have to go crazy. You just have to move. You know, sitting too much is really slowing things down and making it very inefficient. And actually, that's why you see a lot of people go to the gym and they're exercising fanatically almost, and they can't lose weight, and they can't change their body composition. And you know, movement is key for a lot of reasons, but in getting up and not sitting. But you know, diet in that realm in terms of body composition is probably 80% of the game. So yeah, you don't want to sit all day, but that doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and be a fanatic and be like CrossFit, P90X, Insanity, champion of the world, you know? And I'm going to have some classes on that coming up. Yoga, fun Zumba classes, how to do a great 15, 20-minute workout at home. And I can teach you this stuff if you don't already know how to do it. Super efficient. You don't have to kill yourself in the gym. Extra pressure on the surrounding muscles and joints of the lower back. They all link sitting to heart disease, especially now. There's actually a study on that I want to share with you guys. Did you guys know that they link sitting now to heart disease? Hence, sitting is the new smoking. Isn't that unbelievable? Pull that one up. All right, so here's a study. It says, put my glasses. So your risk of developing heart disease increases 64% if you're sedentary, if you're sitting more than 3 hours a day. So researchers at the Department of Exercise Science at the Arnold School of Public Health, the University of South Carolina, evaluated results of a lifestyle survey of 7,744 men aged 20 to 89 who didn't have heart disease in 1982 and recorded amount of time spent watching television or riding in a car. Basically, they found these statistics. Men who spend more than 10 hours a week riding in a car, more than 23 hours of sedentary activity per week, had an 82 and 64% greater risk, respectively, of dying from heart disease than those who had less than 4 hours a week riding in a car or less than 11 hours a week of total sedentary activities. Those are impressive numbers, aren't they? I mean, that's not a little bit more of a risk. That's a huge deal, just from sitting. So most of us sit too much, right? We sit driving to work. We sit in front of a computer. We sit when we're eating. We sit watching TV. Do you know the average American, how many hours?
Next slide.
I know. Thank you. Megan's like, change the slide. So the average American sits 7 hours a day watching TV. Is that unbelievable? Which actually, right. Well, so I'm thinking TV. Maybe that means, so we're taking an average. That means people like me who like watch almost 0, and then there's people who like don't work and watch TV all day. And then you mix it all in, right? So there's your average. But maybe there's also people at work watching TV on their computers. Who knows? That's a lot of sitting, right? Sitting at meetings, right? We have to sit at work sometimes. And if you're sitting more than 50% of your day, you have a sedentary lifestyle. That's most Americans. Right? So no wonder we see more disease. There's more disease than there's ever been. More cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Despite the fact that we spend more money on treatment than any of all of the industrialized countries combined. So You know, it kind of goes back to the Einstein quote, you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking you had when the problem was created, right? And there's the contradiction. One of my other favorite quotes is from Ayn Rand, and she wrote Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. She said, wherever there is contradiction, there will be destruction. And the level of destruction will always be equal to the level of contradiction. I love that one, right? Because that applies certainly to the way we live, right? And, you know, I have a good friend he's a wellness guy, but he sits a lot, and he eats all like pretty clean, healthy food, but he's not the most active guy. You know, even though he's eating organically and all that, he's not moving his body enough. So it's not just one thing or another. You gotta eat right, you gotta move a little bit, you gotta take care of your spine, right? You gotta oxygenate the blood. You gotta drink a lot of water. There's a lot of things that go into being healthy. So why would we sit, right, if we'll develop these disorders? I think people just sit because they think they don't have an alternative, right? So that's what we have to think about, is how do we, what can we do about that? And so the sit-stand option at work is a great way to go. And this is another great thing, I think. Walking means you'll become more creative. There was a study on this. This is kind of interesting. Done at Stanford University, really great school, that walking, just the act of walking itself, will generate new and appropriate ideas. I think that's kind of amusing. I'm not sure what an appropriate idea is, but anyway. But the idea that, you know, movement stimulates some sort of cognition, right, or clarity that you might not otherwise have. Nietzsche, philosopher Nietzsche, said, all truly great thoughts are conceived by walking. Interesting. You know, I think a lot about my grandparents and how they lived, and I reference them a lot because they were special people to me, and they taught me a lot of things, and just sometimes by observation too. And at the end of my grandmother's life, I noticed, you know, she had Alzheimer's, and she didn't really know me at all, like at the end. It's tough to see if you guys have had that experience with family, you know, it's tough to see. But super, I'm talking unbelievably active lady. My grandmother, she was one of these little French lady about this tall, and she used to like shovel snow off her roof, and she was like super active up into her 80s. But by the time she got into her late 90s, she was really, you know, mentally, cognitively not there. But what I noticed when I saw her and visited with her was when she got up and moved, it was like almost like night and day. Her recall and her ability to have a sort of normal stream of conversation. So I didn't know what that meant back then, but now I reflect back on it. I think about this stuff, and I think, you know what, that's what was going on. She was stimulating cognition. Her brain was working better. I want to talk to you guys about that a little bit. But before I get to the, well, you know what, let's do that first. So increase daily movement to avoid age-related brain shrinkage. So scientists are talking about how a sedentary lifestyle is affecting memory and learning ability by promoting neurogenesis. So not just synaptogenesis, the creation of new branches of neurofibers, but actual new neurons. It's unbelievable. They didn't think up until like maybe the early 80s, mid 80s, they didn't even think you could do that. This is new stuff. Pretty incredible. So they say the converse is also true, that by not only by not being sedentary, but by movement, by movement you create the neurogenesis, but the sedentary lifestyle correlates to brain shrinkage. That's pretty scary, right? So actually your brain shrinks. I didn't know that. Right? Just by not moving. So in Newsweek they published this, they put this study out that was from Neurology, links how low levels of physical fitness in midlife to lower brain tissue volume 2 decades later exists. Brain volume is one marker of brain aging. Brain volume is one marker of brain aging. And this atrophy is related to cognitive decline and increased risk for dementia. So exercise helps by increasing blood flow to your brain, increasing production of nerve-protecting compounds, improving development of survival neurons, and reducing damaging plaques in your brain. They did a study, a Framingham Heart Study, and it's, at the outset, these people were free of dementia and heart disease, and each person took a treadmill test, which was then duplicated 20 years later. They did a follow-up, and basically they found that the people that moved had less brain shrinkage, less heart disease and less brain shrinkage. Did you guys know that? That your brain shrinks from sitting too much? I knew I figured like my biceps might shrink a little bit, but my brain, that's kind of scary.
So you're saying I should walk instead of doing things like word searches and all that stuff? I thought that was using a
Right, great point, right. So just the act of learning stimulates synaptogenesis. So that's a good thing. That's like exercising the brain, right?
But I still have to do.
But the lack of movement and the lack of proprioceptive, this movement input into the body, into the brain, basically what they're saying now is that your brain isn't the engine, your spine's the engine. And that movement puts information into the spinal cord, turns on the brain, and changes the output. Sensory integration is the key. Movement.
So I had a question. My husband and I take turns using dumbbells while watching TV.
Awesome.
I don't know, is that really doing what you need to do? Or is
I
that
think-
just working your muscles, but not
No,
necessarily
it's
your
good.
brain?
It's good. There are fewer mechanoreceptors in those joints than say in the head and neck, in pelvis and hips. And they're actually, in another study, they're linking leg movement specifically to brain development and leg strength. Yeah.
Put your bike in front of the TV.
There you go.
There you go.
That's the way to go, right? The stationary bike rather than the treadmill too, with the monitors,
Yeah.
because then you're not gonna get killed, right? There's a book called Spark, The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain. It's a great book. This guy, Dr. Rady, discusses the evidence showing that exercise actually produces large cognitive gains and helps fight dementia. That's a really good book. Spark, The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain. You guys are into that kind of stuff. So I thought that was interesting because I didn't think that really happened. Also, exercise, the companies that says are banning sitting at work meetings, there's a lot of reasons why, but people are less productive and more likely to get hurt, right? Work injuries cost companies a lot of money. Exercise also helps shrink tumors and combats cancer in many ways. So I want to end the research portion by sharing this one with you. A 2003 paper published in the Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise said more than 100 epidemiologic studies on the role of physical activity in cancer prevention have been published. Don't you think that's fascinating? We don't hear about that, right? We hear about the latest drug intervention, right? The newest trial going on. But there's huge, huge evidence that talks about things like adrenaline-dependent immune cells shrink tumors. So those cells get turned on with exercise. And oxygenating the blood with movement kills cancer. That's why cancer risk goes way up with a sedentary lifestyle. JAMA Oncology 2015. So these are like heavyweight journals, right? Said men who stayed fit in middle age had a 55% lower risk of lung cancer and 44% lower risk of bowel cancer after the age of 65. And there's plenty of research that, where they do men and women. Journal of the National Cancer Institute, 2015, aerobic exercise slowed the growth of breast cancer tumors in mice by increasing tissue oxygenation. It improved the effectiveness of chemotherapy. Obviously, we'd rather not have to go through chemo, but that's nice to know. Weight training, so again, movement doesn't have to be crazy. Reduce cancer risk in men by 40%. Women who were active at home during the day, engaging in some lifting and carrying rather than mostly sitting, had a 38% reduced risk of invasive breast cancers. That's American Journal of Public Health, 2010. And 2005 Harvard study said that breast cancer patients who exercise moderately, 3 to 5 hours a week, not a lot, lowered their odds of dying from cancer by about half compared to sedentary patients. So basically, what they've come to conclude, right, is that your risk of all disease, including cancer, brain disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, heart disease, diabetes, it all goes down. So, in other classes, we'll talk about how to move, how to get exercise. Just the act of not sitting and moving and walking is exercise. Walking, I'd say all the time, is underrated. And if I know a lot of you guys already walk, which is awesome, but just getting out and walking, 30 minutes even, 30 minutes, 20 minutes a day. And personally, I despise cardio. I cannot stand getting on a bike or a treadmill or anything like that. So I keep my heart rate up, and I'll just move my body, So I'll do some floor exercises, maybe some pull-ups and stuff like that. You don't have to do that though, but you can do light dumbbells, you can get out and take a walk, easy stuff. And just those things alone really decrease your risk of all disease. And where chiropractic fits into this, how do we help? We're great with the neck and the low back pain, right? Everyone seems to know that, right? That's sort of somehow that became our niche. But the problem I have with that, as much as that's nice, is that chiropractic sort of devolved into that. In 1895, if you don't know it, chiropractic was founded in Davenport, Iowa. This gentleman, D.D. Palmer, found a man who had told him the story of how he lost his hearing when he had an injury to his spine. Good question. And
Exercising my fingers.
yeah, there you go. Stimulating the brain. And so D.D. basically put a thrust into Harvey Lillard's neck, the lower part of his neck. Harvey had told him the story of how he lost his hearing when he had an injury of some sort. And anyway, his hearing came back. And that's how the whole profession began. So it was always a relationship between structure and function. He didn't say to D.D. Palmer, my ear is killing me. I don't know why. Can you help me? It wasn't about pain. So when you guys come in, right, I'm always talking about I want you to feel better, right? I want you to move better. Those are sort of basics. But more importantly, I want your spine to be healthy, because that's there to protect, that's the foundation of your lifeline, your nerve supply. So we talk about the 4 essentials of life and health: food, water, oxygen, and nerve supply. Those are the 4 biggies. And then the 5th sort of other thing would be remove toxins, which is really not an easy thing, right? But we're always working at that, at home and in the office, but trying to cut out the detergents and the toothpastes and the soaps and the cleaners and all these products that are toxic. And we had a class on that, some of you guys were at that class, and I think you learned a few things. That was fun. But the thing is with nerve supply, you're damaging it. When you're sitting too much, that's what's happening. Basically, that's what's going on. You're putting a lot of pressure on your spinal cord, and you're basically turning down the function of the brain. And interestingly, I think, insurance companies, this isn't my favorite thing to do, by the way. I love being with you guys, adjusting you. I think that's awesome, and I don't take it for granted. You guys who come in and get adjusted know that I love that, and I love you guys. But for me, it's interesting that the clinical side is interesting, and then the paperwork, behind the scenes stuff that I hate doing. But one of the things that I do think is interesting behind the scenes that you might not know is attorneys and insurance companies pay me a lot of money, mostly attorneys, to give them these reports that define somebody's level or degree of disability or impairment, whole person impairment ratings, AMA guideline based. And it's interesting to me that do you know what the #1 criteria is for those ratings that really determine whether or not somebody gets paid, gets to function if they can't work anymore, be able to live? The #1 criteria that insurance companies look at, and they have the smartest actuarial people on the planet that dissect this stuff. The #1 criteria is spinal range of motion. Interesting. Because you know why? they know that that has everything to do with your health, your vitality. So that's the foundation, right? And so the more you sit, the more you're like the light bulb on the dimmer switch, basically. So more than 3 hours a day, not good. Right, so if you're sitting that much, right, and that's most of us, right? I happen to have a crazy job where I'm standing all day long, but that's probably not good either. I have other challenges with my feet and things like that, so I gotta pay attention to that. But getting adjusted is a great way to combat that stuff as well, and obviously change, remove the cause. Right, that's what we're all about. DC, the doctor of chiropractic, we joke and we say, well, we're doctor of cause. We want to see people remove the cause, don't just treat the symptom. So that's really it for tonight. I hope that was interesting and helpful for you guys. I didn't know some of that before I started really reading up on this and getting ready for presenting to you guys about the neurology part in terms of the brain dysfunction. You guys have any questions for me? No? Okay, awesome. Thanks for being here.